Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop and your heart settle. You've come to the right place. Here, the world slows down. The noise fades, and in its place, a quiet invitation to rest in the presence of the one who loves you most. Tonight, I want to share 2 gentle stories with you. Stories of women who waited faithfully, quietly, who lit lamps, broke bread, and somehow found themselves face to face with the one their hearts longed for. You may be tired tonight. You may feel far from him, but I promise you he is near. And if you'll stay a while, you just might hear his voice in the silence. So tuck yourself in. Let the stillness come, and listen closely for the soft footsteps of grace. I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with unfailing kindness. Jeremiah 31:3. The first light of morning brushed softly against the stone walls of Miriam's cottage. It was an old house, with floors that creaked kindly and windows that looked out over olive groves and wildflowers. A place built not just of wood and clay, but of memory. Miriam was a widow. She had lived here for almost 60 years. Most of her days now were slow and simple, marked by the rhythm of prayer, bread rising, birds landing on the sill. She did not speak much anymore, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned how to listen. Each morning, she would place a small piece of bread on the windowsill. She had done it for years, first for her husband, then for her children, and now for someone else entirely. Not a sparrow came to take it, not a neighbor passed to notice it. But still, she left it there, a quiet offering, a memory, a mystery. Take a deep breath. Rest here for a moment. In this part of the world, bread is never just bread. It is hope. It is presence. It is a whisper of God's nearness when the world feels far away. And so each morning, as the sun rose over her little town, Miriam rose too, not to chase the day, but to welcome it, to sit in her quiet kitchen with her Lord, and to offer not what was great, but what was small and enough. Bedtime takeaway. You don't need to do big things to be seen by God. Even your smallest offerings, He notices. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. The days in Miriam's home passed gently, like the slow turning of pages in a cherished book. She did not count them anymore, not by calendars or clocks, but by sunsets, by the hum of wind through the olive trees, by the feel of her hands kneading dough, and by the soft presence she sensed when she sat by the window. One evening, as twilight settled like a prayer over the hills, Miriam lit her little oil lamp. The shadows in her home stretched long and kind, not frightening. They reminded her of her husband's arms around her long ago, and the silence they used to share in peace. She had just finished her simple supper when she heard a knock at the door. So soft, it could have been the breeze, but she knew better. She rose slowly, as one who carries her years with grace. Her knees ached, but she smiled at them. They had taken her far enough. When she opened the door, there was a man, not young, not old, wearing plain robes, his hands dusted with the day's journey. He did not speak right away. Their eyes met. Something eternal passed between them, not loud, not startling, but familiar, like an old song remembered in silence. She stepped aside and nodded gently. "Would you like some bread?" she asked. He bowed. "I would be grateful." There were no introductions, no questions, no need. She led him to the little table by the fire, brought him water, and from the bread she had made that morning, she broke a piece. He ate slowly, gratefully, and when he looked at her again, his eyes held more than thanks. They held knowing. "Why do you leave bread on your window each morning?" he asked, voice calm. Miriam looked out at the window, now glowing in the warm firelight. "It's for the one I miss, the one I talk to, the one who always seems to visit me, though no one else sees him." The man nodded slowly, placing the bread down gently. "You believe he sees it?" She smiled. "Oh yes, I think he takes it even if it's still there. I think he sits with me, even when I can't feel it. And I think he loves that I still believe he does." The man's hands rested gently on the table. He looked down, then up again, into her quiet faith. "I think," he whispered, "you're right. Take a deep breath. Let that sit with you." She didn't ask who he was. She didn't need to. She only poured him another cup of water and watched the fire flicker across his face. Something in her heart slowed, not from fear, but from deep, holy rest. Bedtime takeaway. God sees the bread on your windowsill, and he sees the heart that places it there. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. Psalm 145:18. The room was quiet now. The fire cracked gently. Outside, the breeze whispered through branches, as if creation itself had paused to listen. Miriam and the man sat in that silence, not the awkward kind, but the sacred sort, where words are no longer needed to feel close. After a while, the man leaned back. His eyes looked not at the fire, but through it, as if he were remembering something older than time. "There was once a shepherd," he said softly. Miriam didn't interrupt. "He had many sheep. He knew each by name. They followed him not because he drove them, but because they knew his voice. It was gentle, steady, always kind." He paused and looked at her. She nodded, encouraging him. One day, a storm rolled in from nowhere. The skies darkened too fast. The rain poured. And in the rush of thunder and wind, one little lamb was swept far from the others. His voice remained soft, like a lullaby. The others huddled close. But the shepherd, he left them not out of carelessness, but out of love. He looked down at his hands. They tried to stop him. They said, "Stay with the 99. The one will find its way back." But the shepherd shook his head. The man raised his eyes again, and something shone there, like tears not yet cried. He walked into the storm, through the mud, the wind, the cold. He walked not knowing where, but knowing who. He called the lamb's name again and again, until his voice was raw with longing. The fire gave a quiet pop, like a heartbeat, and then he found it. Cold, shaking, too weak to even bleat, but alive. He leaned in slightly now, his voice even softer. The shepherd didn't scold. He didn't say, "Why did you run off?" He just wrapped the lamb in his cloak, lifted it to his heart, and said, "I never stopped looking for you." Miriam's hand, resting on her lap, trembled slightly. She blinked once, then again. Not because she was unsure of the story, but because she knew it too well. She had once been that lamb. Take a deep breath. Let that settle gently. She looked at the man. "I think you know that shepherd quite well." The man smiled, not broadly, not for show, but deeply like someone smiling at an old friend. "I do." Then he looked around her little kitchen, the jars, the fire, the fading loaf of bread. "And I think, so do you." They said no more. There was nothing more to say, only a quiet understanding between them and the warmth of presence shared. Bedtime takeaway. Even when the storm feels long and you feel lost, he never stops looking for you. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you and I will carry you. Isaiah 46:4. The hours drifted by like leaves on a stream. Neither of them stirred much after the story. The fire grew smaller, but not cold. The silence between them deepened, not with distance, but with the kind of closeness that doesn't demand words. Miriam stood slowly and lit another small lamp. Its gentle glow filled the shadows with honey-colored light. She turned to the man, who now sat with his eyes closed, not sleeping, just resting, as if the day had been long, as if he had traveled far. "I've never asked your name," she said quietly. The man opened his eyes but did not answer. Instead, he looked at her with the kind of gaze that makes you forget you ever needed a name. She softened. "Would you like to stay the night? I have a small cot near the hearth. It's warm, and the bread will still be fresh in the morning." He nodded gently. "As you have offered it, I gratefully accept." Miriam prepared the bed, folding the worn blanket the way her mother once had. Every crease held memory. Every motion was prayer. She handed him a pillow. Her hands brushed his fingers. They were calloused, but strangely comforting. "Sleep well," she whispered. "And you," he replied. Before she turned to go to her own room, she paused by the window, the same one where she placed the bread each morning. She glanced at the sill. The last crust of the evening offering still sat there. But something was different. It was glowing, faintly, as though kissed by light no candle could give. As if someone had touched it from the inside out. She closed her eyes. A soft breath left her lungs. She whispered, not to the man, but to the one she loved, "Thank you." Take a deep breath. Let your soul be quiet. In the other room, the man lay still, but not asleep. His eyes looked at the ceiling, then beyond it, to stars only he had named. And there, in a stranger's home, on a borrowed cot, beneath the hush of midnight, Jesus rested, not because he was tired, but because he had been welcomed. Bedtime takeaway. When you make room for him in your kitchen, your story, your quiet little heart, he stays. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Psalm 35. The first light of dawn crept in slowly, spilling softly across the stone floor, touching the table, the empty cup, the cooled bread still resting in the quiet. The birds began to sing, not loudly, but with the tender hush of those who know they sing for someone listening. Miriam stirred in her bed. She had dreamed, a dream not filled with images, but with a presence, warm, weightless, real. She rose and tied her shawl gently over her shoulders, her fingers slower than they once were, but steady in purpose. As she stepped into the kitchen, she paused. The cot near the hearth was empty, neatly folded, undisturbed, as if no one had lain there at all. But something lingered, a scent like olive leaves warmed by sun, a hush like the air after prayer, and on the table, where last night's bread had rested, was a new loaf, still warm. She walked to it slowly, touched it. It was the same shape as hers, but different. It bore marks not of her hands, but of his, and beside it, a small note, written in no ink she recognized, and yet every letter felt carved into her memory. It read, "I was here, I always am." She sat down, and for the first time in many months, tears filled her eyes. Not the aching kind, not the tears of loneliness or sorrow, but of nearness, of being seen, of being held in ways the world never notices. Take a deep breath. Let that truth wash over you. She ate a piece of the bread slowly, as if partaking in something sacred. She wasn't hungry, but she was being nourished. She lifted her gaze to the window, and there, a little bird landed on the sill. It looked at her, then hopped to where the bread offering usually sat. But this morning, there was no crust, only the still glowing memory of love received. Miriam smiled. There was no need for a fresh offering today. She had already been fed by the hands of the one who comes quietly, faithfully, always. Bedtime takeaway. Sometimes, the Lord doesn't just visit, he leaves behind reminders that he never left. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. John 10:27. That morning passed like a hymn. No errands, no visitors, no words. Only the gentle companionship of silence and the warmth still lingering in the kitchen. Miriam didn't feel the usual weight of age today, not because her body had changed, but because something within her had softened. She swept the floor slowly. She hummed a melody she hadn't remembered in years, one her mother used to sing as the lentil stew simmered, a lullaby of longing and of hope. She paused by the window again, and though no bread sat there, she felt no guilt, no need. It was as if the silence itself had become full, like a jar no longer empty, but brimming with invisible oil. There are kinds of silence that ache, and there are kinds that heal. This was the healing kind. A knock came on the door mid-morning, firm, but not rushed. Miriam opened it to find her neighbor's daughter, Ruth, a young widow herself, eyes tired, voice small. "I don't know why," Ruth said gently, "but I woke up this morning and felt I needed to come here." Miriam welcomed her with a smile. She knew. They sat at the table, two women from different generations but held together by the same ache, and now the same comfort. Miriam cut a slice of the bread left by her visitor. She placed it before Ruth. The young woman took a bite, then stopped. She looked down, then up again. "This bread? It tastes like, I don't know, like someone loves me?" Miriam nodded. She reached across the table, placed her hand on Ruth's. "That's because someone does." Ruth's eyes filled, but she did not cry, only breathed deeper, as if she hadn't known how much she needed that. "Take a deep breath. Let yourself be known here." They didn't speak much after that. Words would have been too sharp, so they just sat. And in the quiet between them, a voice larger than either of them whispered healing into the places that had gone without it for too long. That afternoon, Miriam didn't place bread on the windowsill, not because she had forgotten, but because she didn't need to ask anymore. He had already answered. Bedtime takeaway. When God speaks, it's often not with noise, but with presence. His silence is not absence. It is intimacy. "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." Psalm 23:5. The days that followed were unlike any Miriam had ever known, not because the world changed, but because she had. She still rose early, still swept the same floor, still lit the same small lamp as dusk fell across the hills. But now, there was something new. A hush of expectancy in even the simplest tasks. A quiet joy tucked into the folds of daily routine. And most curious of all, the bread never seemed to run out. Each morning, she would find the loaf, still warm, wrapped gently in a clean cloth. Never more than she needed. Never less. Just enough. She tried once to save a piece, thinking perhaps she could make it last longer. But by evening, that piece had grown dry and heavy, as if it were meant only for the day it was given. So she learned to trust, to receive what came, to eat when it was time, to give thanks without needing to understand. Word began to spread quietly among the nearby homes. Widows who had little, mothers whose cupboards were bare, elders who couldn't stand long enough to need. They came to Miriam not because she had much, but because she had peace. And Miriam, with her simple hands and steady smile, began to share the bread, not explaining it, not defending it, just breaking it gently and placing it in the hands of those who needed it. No one left hungry. Ruth came often now. She would help sweep, hang the laundry, watch the birds with Miriam in the afternoon sun, and together they would wait each evening, not with worry, but with wonder. And always, the bread came. Take a deep breath. Let that slow, generous rhythm wrap around you. One evening, as the sky turned gold and lavender, Ruth asked softly, "Do you think it's him?" Miriam smiled, without turning from the window. "I don't think," she said gently. "I know." She looked down at the empty plate on the sill, a place now sacred. not because of what sat upon it, but because of who had once stood beside it. Bedtime takeaway: God gives daily bread, but sometimes He gives it with His own hands. I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. John 14:18. Summer deepened over the village. The fields grew golden with grain. The olive trees thickened with fruit. And still, each morning, the bread came. There were no footsteps in the dust, no shadows slipping through the dark, no knocking, no voice. But the bread was always there, wrapped gently, still warm, still enough. One morning, after Ruth had returned home to tend to her son, Miriam opened the old wooden bread box, the one her husband had carved in their first year of marriage. It creaked like always, but something rested atop the loaf, a folded piece of parchment. She paused. Her heart didn't race. It softened with trembling fingers. She unfolded the note. The writing was unfamiliar, not in script, but in feeling, as if it had been written not with ink, but with knowing. It read, "Do not be afraid when the bread ceases. It means I have invited you to dine at my table instead. Love, your friend." She held the letter to her chest, closed her eyes. A soft smile crossed her lips. Take a deep breath. Let peace flow in slowly. That evening, Miriam lit her lamp like always, swept the floor like always, prepared the table like always. But something in her heart whispered, this might be the last. Not in sorrow, not in fear, but like a traveler who senses the boat will soon arrive, like a child who knows she will soon be gathered into arms. She didn't place the bread on the window that night. Instead, she took the last piece from the loaf and set it gently on her plate. She looked to the chair across from her, the one that had been empty for years, but lately had not felt so. She whispered, "You're always welcome here." And in the quiet, though no one was visible, the air shifted. It felt like love taking form, like the unseen reaching in, cupping her face in invisible hands. She bowed her head, not from weariness, but from wonder. Bedtime takeaway. When the daily miracles fade, it is not because He has left, but because He is calling you even closer. Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of His saints. Psalm 116:15. The following morning was quiet, not with absence, but with fullness. The sun rose slowly, its light brushing every corner of Miriam's little home as if saying goodbye. Bird song floated through the open window. The olive branches swayed with calm dignity, and on the windowsill, there was no bread, but there was no need. Inside, the house glowed softly, not with fire, not with candle, but with something else, something unseen, but unmistakably holy. Miriam lay in her bed, her face turned gently toward the light. Her hands rested one atop the other, like folded wings. There was no pain in her brow, no fear in her breath, only stillness. And the faintest trace of a smile, as though she had seen something. Someone. And she had gone to him. That afternoon, Ruth returned. She had brought figs, some fresh oil, and a folded cloth to help Miriam with her shoulders. But as soon as she stepped inside the house, she stopped. The silence met her like a hush in a chapel. She walked to the bedroom slowly, her eyes filled, not with grief, but with awe. Miriam was gone, but the room was not empty. It was filled with presence. Take a deep breath. Rest with Ruth for a moment here. She sat beside Miriam's bed, took her hand one last time. It was warm. Ruth bowed her head, and for a long while, she simply sat in the quiet and let the nearness of God hold her. Later that evening, as dusk began to gather over the hills, Ruth lit the little lamp, swept the floor, and sat at the table. The bread box was empty, and yet she could almost smell the loaf, still warm. She whispered, "Thank you." And something in the air answered, not in words, but in peace. Bedtime takeaway. To fall asleep in Christ is to awaken at his table, where bread never runs out and love never ends. In my Father's house are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you. John 14:2. Time passed gently after Miriam's home grew quiet. There was no funeral, only neighbors who came in small numbers not to mourn, but to sit in the chair she once sat in, to touch the worn table, to breathe the stillness she left behind. And somehow, in doing so, they found something of God. Ruth, now more steady, began to tend to the house, not to keep it exactly as it was, but to let it remain what it had always been, a place of welcome, a table open to the hungry, a silence full of presence. She lit the lamp each evening. She swept the floor. She didn't bake bread every day, but often enough. And sometimes, when she forgot, she'd still find a warm loaf waiting quietly in the box. Not always, but just enough to know she wasn't alone. One crisp autumn morning, an old man came to the door. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, and his hands were shaking slightly. I heard she's gone," he said. Ruth nodded gently. "She's home now." He blinked down at his shoes, then looked at her with watery eyes. "I used to pass by each morning and see the bread on her sill. For years, never took it, but just knowing it was there made me feel like someone was waiting." Ruth smiled. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. He stepped inside slowly, sat at the table, the same table that had welcomed a savior. Ruth poured him water, placed a piece of warm bread before him, and for a moment, it was as if Miriam had never left, only stepped into another room to prepare more for the feast. Take a deep breath, feel the comfort of continuity. Later that evening, as Ruth sat alone by the hearth, she opened the small drawer beneath the bread box. There, tucked beneath the parchment from before, was another note, smaller, faded. It read, "The table is never empty when love is remembered. I'll see you again at the meal that never ends." She folded it softly, held it to her heart, and whispered, "I'll keep setting the table." Bedtime takeaway. When we remember the love of those who loved him, we carry a piece of eternity into the present. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Hebrews 13:8. Winter came quietly, not with fury, but with grace. The olive trees grew still. The wildflowers tucked themselves into the soil, and Miriam's little home stood gently against the turning world, unchanged in soul. Though the air outside grew colder, Ruth still came, still lit the lamp, still swept the floor and waited by the window in the evenings. Even when no bread came, she had come to understand something Miriam once knew, that God's presence is not proven by miracles, but by memory and by love. Some nights the fire was slow to start. Some mornings the ache of missing her friend was stronger. But always, somewhere beneath the sorrow, was peace. There was peace in the knowing, in the promise kept, in the echo of the words once spoken. I was here. I always am. One evening, as the first snow dusted the stones outside, Ruth heard something unexpected. A knock. She opened the door, and there stood a young boy, no more than 10, with cheeks flushed from the cold. "Are you the woman who shares bread?" he asked shyly. She smiled. "I try to be. My grandmother told me to come here. She said you'd tell me the stories." "What stories?" Ruth asked gently. "The stories of the man who visits, but leaves no footprints." Ruth stepped aside. "Come in. It's warm." She prepared a small bowl of lentils, tore a piece of bread, and sat with him by the fire. And as the snow fell softly outside, she told him of the woman who placed bread on her windowsill, and the quiet guest who came to eat and stayed to love. Take a deep breath. Let your soul remember what it already knows. The boy listened with wide eyes, not with fear but with wonder. And Ruth knew, in that simple evening, another table had been set, not just with food, but with faith. Bedtime takeaway. Even as seasons change, the stories of his nearness keep warming new hearts. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. Revelation 3:20. Years passed, softly, like footsteps on sand. Ruth grew older. The boy who came in winter grew tall. Others came, too, some hungry for food, others hungry for something deeper. None left untouched. The house stayed the same, though time painted it gently. The door was never locked. The lamp still glowed in the evening, and though the loaf did not always appear, the memory of it, the truth of it, remained in the walls, in the table, in the silence. One autumn morning, a traveler arrived from far away. He was weary, with dust on his boots and questions in his eyes. He knocked just once. Ruth opened the door, smiling softly. "I've been expecting you, but you don't know me," he said. She shook her head gently. "Not yet." He stepped inside, and as his eyes adjusted to the warm, golden room, he froze. His gaze landed on the old bread box, the lamp, the chair by the hearth, and something in him melted. "I had dreams of this place as a child," he whispered. "I thought I had imagined it." "You didn't imagine it," Ruth said. "You were being invited." He sat slowly, like someone laying down a burden. "I'm tired," he said. "You've come to the right place." She offered him bread, a bowl of warm broth, and then silence, the kind that speaks louder than words. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to rest in something real. Take a deep breath. Let this be your own invitation. That night, Ruth walked to the window. The sky was clear, stars blinking like soft candles in heaven. She closed her eyes, spoke into the night. Your table is still open. Your presence is still here. And still, I wait, behind her. The traveler stirred in his sleep, a smile forming on his face. Perhaps he, too, felt it, the warmth of a guest who never left. Bedtime takeaway. You may forget many things, but his knock, his table, his love, they never fade. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. Zephaniah 3:17. The house had grown old. The shutters creaked in the wind. The stones were worn smooth beneath countless footsteps. And yet, it was more alive than ever. Children came now, guided by parents who had once sat at Miriam's table. They came not for entertainment, but to be still, to sit in silence and feel something they couldn't quite name but always recognized. There was no sign on the door, no plaque, no sermon, just the quiet hum of welcome that lived in every corner of the house. Some said it was the memory of Miriam. Some said it was the way Ruth always looked you in the eye as if you mattered. But others, the ones who stayed long enough to feel it, said it was something deeper. They said the walls sang, not loud, not with sound, but with something that moved beneath your skin and stirred your soul. A kind of melody only the heart could hear. One evening, long after the last guest had gone, Ruth sat alone by the window. She was older now, her hair silver, her hands lined with years. She didn't need to sweep anymore, didn't need to bake. Everything was prepared, not by her, but by grace. She closed her eyes and leaned back. The night air slipped in, cool and sweet. The lamp flickered, and in that soft moment, she heard it, a song, not from a lyre, not from a voice, but from the very walls of the home. It was the song of bread shared, of silence honored, of love remembered. It was Miriam's life, and hers, and every hand that had passed through this door and touched eternity. Take a deep breath. Let that holy music fill the quiet of your heart. Ruth opened her eyes and whispered, "I hear you." And though no reply came through the window, no shape appeared in the dark, she knew he was there, because where love has lingered long, it does not leave. It becomes a song sung by the walls to those who have ears to hear. Bedtime takeaway. God doesn't just visit homes. He sings through them long after we are gone, so others can follow the music. Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. Revelation 19:9. One night, the traveler who had stayed long ago returned. He was no longer weary. His shoulders were straight, his eyes clearer than Ruth remembered. Time had passed through him, but hadn't dimmed him. It had shaped him. She recognized him at once, not by appearance, but by presence. He stepped into the home gently, as if entering sacred ground. And perhaps he was. Ruth rose from her chair near the hearth. She didn't speak, only smiled. "I dreamed of this house," he said, his voice quiet. "And in the dream, I was invited to a table, not here, but beyond." She nodded slowly. "It's almost time." He looked toward the window, still the same one, still facing east. "Will I find her there?" he asked. His voice carried no sorrow, only longing. "She'll be the one breaking the bread," Ruth said. and he will be sitting beside her. They stood together in silence, watching the night sky shift and soften. And then something happened. Not with thunder, not with light, just a soft wind, and a warmth that filled the room like sunlight before dawn. The traveler turned to Ruth. "There's room for you, too." She smiled. "Not yet, but soon." He nodded, took one last look around the little home, the table, the lamp, the window, the box. Then he stepped out into the night, and as he walked toward the horizon, a golden path opened beneath his feet, one not made of stone, but of welcome. Take a deep breath. Let your heart imagine what your eyes have never seen. Some say that as he passed over, he found a table waiting, a long one, covered in cloth that shimmered like morning mist, with place settings for saints, and the lamb at its head. And there, at the side, a woman in a simple shawl, offering warm bread to the one who had finally arrived. And beside her, a man with scars in his hands and love in his eyes, who said, "I've saved you a seat. Bedtime takeaway. When our journey ends, it ends at a table set by mercy, served by love, and filled with faces we've missed. Surely your goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Psalm 23:6. There are homes that vanish with time, and there are homes that live on because love refused to leave. Miriam's home, though small, though quiet, though weathered by age, became one of those places. But even more, Miriam's life became a windowsill between heaven and earth. For those who passed by, the scent of bread lingered. For those who paused to sit, peace settled like a blanket over the shoulders. And for those who had never known what it was to be welcomed without needing to earn it, her story became a doorway. Over time, Ruth passed the house onto a younger woman, a widow like Miriam, quiet like Ruth, kind. The same lamp was lit each evening, the same fire kindled, and though the names changed, the presence did not. It was always there, always listening, always near, and far beyond the hills, in the place where tears are no longer needed. Miriam now sits at a table without end. She is not hurried. She is not tired. She breaks bread gently, with hands that no longer ache. And when new travelers arrive, souls worn by life, but held by grace, she rises to greet them, as she always did. She places a warm piece of bread in their hands, cups their faces, and whispers, "I saved this for you." And Jesus, seated just beside her, smiles and says, "She always knew how to wait well." Take a deep breath and rest in that picture. Some say that if you listen closely on certain nights, when the wind moves through the olive trees, you can hear a song carried down from heaven's table, the song of saints who once waited and now feast, the song of bread that never grows stale, of silence that never aches, of love that never forgets. And somewhere, in the mystery of it all, you might find your own soul pulling up a chair. Final bedtime takeaway. You are not forgotten. A place has been prepared for you, And when the evening comes, he will meet you at the windowsill and walk you home. She lit the bread each morning. The other lit a flame each night. Both waited, both loved, and both were seen. As one story ends, another begins like a quiet flame passed from one faithful hand to another. So don't go yet. There is more light to come, more of him to discover. In the next story, we'll meet a woman named Salma. She sits by her door each evening, lamp glowing, waiting for a guest she's never seen, but somehow knows. Stay with me, let's listen together. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119:105. There was a woman who lived near the edge of the village, where the road turned to dust and the olive trees thinned. Her name was Salma. She had lived in that house for so long. Even the stones in her doorstep seemed to know her by name. She walked slowly now, with a cane made from the branch of a tree her father once planted. Her fingers were curved like question marks. Her eyes, like the sea at sunset, still and full of stories. She had outlived many friends, siblings, even the man who once built her this home. Yet her spirit was not brittle, only quiet, as if it had grown soft from listening too long to things the world could not hear. Every evening before the sunset, Salma lit a lamp and placed it beside her door, not to guide guests. They rarely came now, and not because she feared the dark. She lit it for someone else. She never spoke it aloud, not even in her prayers, but deep in her heart. She believed he might pass by, and that if he did, he would see the light and know she was still waiting. The oil was not much. The wick burned low, but she lit it faithfully, every night, without fail. And though her hands trembled sometimes, her heart did not. Take a deep breath. Let your thoughts grow still. In her quiet home, Salma did not need noise. She needed only the soft presence of peace and the flicker of hope that perhaps tonight he might come, not to fix anything, not to speak loud, just to sit and let her rest her soul near his. Bedtime takeaway. Sometimes the deepest act of faith is simply keeping the light on. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. Lamentations 3:25. That night, the stars came early. The sky wore its velvet coat, and the village settled into silence. Salma sat by the lamp she had placed beside the door. Her chair creaked gently beneath her, a sound she had come to love, like an old friend clearing their throat before speaking. The flame danced, not wildly, just enough to be seen. She whispered a short prayer, nothing rehearsed, just something simple, like breath made into words. I don't need much, Lord, just your nearness. That's all. Then she waited. Sometimes she dozed. Sometimes she watched the shadow of olive branches sway on the wall. But always, she waited. And that night, just as her eyes began to close, she felt something shift. It wasn't sound, not exactly, but presence, as if the space around her had made room for someone gentle. She looked up, and there at the edge of the lamp's light stood a man, cloaked in blue, dust on his sandals, his eyes deep and kind, like someone who had walked through many sorrows and turned each of them into compassion. He didn't speak, nor did she, but she rose, without fear, without question. "Would you like to sit?" she asked. He nodded once, softly. They sat side by side, not close enough to touch, but not far enough to feel apart. He looked at the lamp. "You kept it lit," he said. She smiled gently. "I always hoped you might pass by." "And if I didn't," he asked, "I still would have lit it." He turned to her slowly, and in his gaze she saw no judgment, only depth. "Take a deep breath. Let that question linger softly." They sat in silence. Then he whispered, "Do you remember the first night you lit it?" She did, so clearly. Her husband had just passed. Her body had felt hollow. Her prayers had been wordless. She had found the lamp tucked behind a clay jar, had poured the oil with trembling hands, had lit it, not knowing why, only that she needed to. "I do remember," she said. "I was broken, but I still believed you were near." He looked down, then back up. "You weren't wrong." The lamp flickered brighter for a moment, as if it recognized the voice that spoke. Bedtime takeaway. God sees the light you keep burning in the dark, even when no one else does. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Matthew 6:6. The house was still, the kind of stillness that doesn't ask questions, the kind that holds space for something holy. Salma rose from her chair beside the lamp and walked slowly to a shelf carved into the wall. She reached for a small olive wood box, a gift from her father, long, long ago. Its lid was smooth with years of touch. The grain of the wood had darkened like lines on a weathered hand. She opened it. Inside, folded neatly, were the letters she had written to the Lord over the years. Prayers too heavy to speak aloud, hope too fragile to share with others, scribbled in the dark, tucked away with trembling trust. Some were stained with tears, others barely legible. None had ever been sent, but all had been read. She held one now, creased at the edges. It read, "Dear Lord, I don't know if you hear me tonight. I don't know if you see me sitting alone with this lamp, but I want you to know I'm still here, still hoping, still loving you." She handed it to the man in the blue cloak. "I wrote this 12 years ago," she said. He unfolded it carefully, as though it were sacred, as though it were scripture. "I remember the night," he whispered. "You were tired, but you still lit the flame." Salma's eyes softened. "Did you read them all?" He looked at her, eyes shining gently. "I never missed one." She covered her mouth, a quiet breath escaping. Not from disbelief, but from wonder. "Take a deep breath. Let your soul sit quietly in that tenderness." He handed the letter back, then placed his hand over the box. Not to take it, not to remove the past, but to bless it. "You spoke to me through these pages," he said, "and I answered you, though sometimes in silence." Salma closed the box slowly, as though closing a long chapter, not of absence, but of deep communion. "You never needed to find the words," he added. "I was already listening." And in that small, oil-lit room, the years of loneliness lost their sting. They had been holy ground all along. Bedtime takeaway. God collects every quiet prayer, even the ones you never speak out loud. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. Isaiah 42:3. The night grew deeper, and the flame beside the door began to tremble. It danced softly now, not with fear, but with fatigue. Salma noticed. She turned to the man sitting across from her. "Sometimes I wonder if it's enough," she whispered. He looked at the flickering light, then back at her. "It's more than enough," she sighed. "I'm not as strong as I was. Some nights, I fall asleep before I even light it. Other nights, I question why I still do it at all." He nodded slowly. "Even smoldering wicks are precious to me." Salma's eyes misted. Her hands rested in her lap, palms open like empty bowls. "I used to think faith had to be loud," she said, confident, certain, "but mine feels more like quiet breath." He smiled. "Faith is not the volume of your belief. It's the direction your heart leans when you're tired." She let out a shaky breath. "Some nights, I just lean toward the door. That's all I've ever asked," he whispered. "Take a deep breath. Let his gentleness meet your weakness." The lamp sputtered softly, but the room remained warm. Salma rose again, slower now, and trimmed the wick. She added the last of her oil, watched the flame rise again, not in brilliance, but in endurance. He watched her tenderly, as if watching a daughter bring him a cup of water. "You do this for me," he said, "even when no one sees. But I do." Her hands trembled, but her spirit steadied. "And when I can no longer light it," she asked. He reached for her hand. "I will carry the flame myself." Silence fell like a soft blanket, the kind that doesn't just cover but heals. Bedtime takeaway. When your light flickers low, God does not turn away. He draws nearer. "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Exodus 33:14. The fire in the hearth had faded now, leaving only gentle warmth against the stone. Outside, the wind stirred through the olive branches, a lullaby of rustling leaves. Salma sat very still. The visitor hadn't moved, but his presence had changed. He seemed closer somehow, not in body, but in spirit. It was like sitting beside someone you've known your entire life, but only just begun to understand. "I used to ask you for answers," she said quietly, "for direction, for signs, for proof." She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap like worn linen. "But in the last few years, I've stopped asking so much. I just wanted you to stay." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he breathed in slowly, as if even silence was a form of response. Then, in a voice not loud, not dramatic, but full of quiet weight, he said, "I never left." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the deep, aching relief that comes when someone confirms what you dared to hope was true. She blinked, and the tears slipped down. Even in the long night, she asked, especially then. She looked at the lamp, burning low now but steady. "Even when I didn't feel you." He turned toward her, his gaze full of something ancient and unshakable. "My child, the feeling was never the measure of my presence. Love is not proven by what you feel. It is proven by what remains." Take a deep breath. Let his presence hold your soul for a moment. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in many years, she did not try to reach for him. She simply rested in him, and that, somehow, was deeper. After a while, she opened her eyes. "You're going soon, aren't you?" He didn't deny it, but neither did he rise. "I go when you no longer need to see me to know I'm here." Salma nodded slowly. Her heart was calm, not because she had found answers, but because she had found presence, the kind that lingers long after the flame dies down. Bedtime takeaway. You don't have to see him to be held. His nearness is not a feeling, it's a promise. The jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry. 1 Kings 17:16. The wind outside had quieted. It was that hour when even time seems to sleep when shadows soften, and the world forgets its hurry. Salma reached for her small oil jar. It was nearly empty. She tilted it gently, and one final drop slid into the base of the lamp. A quiet offering, a widow's mite, a last breath of faith. She did not panic. She did not pray for more. She simply whispered, "This is what I have left. Lord, if it pleases you, let it burn." The flame flickered once, then steadied, and Salma, tired in her bones but calm in her soul, sat beside it one more time. He had not left yet. She could feel it like warmth just before sunrise. He sat with his hands folded gently on the table, watching her the way an artist watches something almost complete, not needing to fix, only to admire. "You never asked me for much," he said. She smiled softly. "I thought I didn't need to. I just wanted you near." He nodded. "You asked for the better portion, and it won't be taken from you." Her eyes began to close, not from sorrow, from peace. "I don't think I'll light it tomorrow," she said quietly. He didn't protest. Instead, he rose slowly, walked to the lamp, and without a word, he touched the glass. The flame shone brighter, not from oil, but from presence. Take a deep breath. Rest in that still brightness. Salma looked up one last time. "You'll come again." He leaned close, whispered into the hush, "My child, I never left." And with that, he vanished into the stillness. Not with sound, not with flash, just gone. Yet the lamp glowed on, and the room, though empty of figures, was full. Bedtime takeaway. When you give your last drop to him, he turns it into light that never fades. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Matthew 28:20. Morning came slowly. The sky stretched itself awake in shades of rose and ash. Doves cooed gently from the nearby rooftop. The village began to stir, doors creaking open, pails filling with water, voices hushed by the softness of dawn. But in Salma's house, there was no motion, only stillness, and a lamp still glowing beside the door. Neighbors noticed. They waited longer than usual before knocking, not out of fear, but reverence. When they finally entered, they found her sitting peacefully in her chair, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, a slight curve of smile resting on her face like a final amen. She had gone, but the room had not emptied. Not truly, for the warmth in the air was unmistakable. not the kind that comes from fire or sun, but from a soul's final longing finally met. One neighbor whispered, "She must have seen him." Another nodded, or perhaps he never left. Take a deep breath. Let your heart lean into that mystery. The oil jar still sat on the shelf, bone dry, but beside it, on the table, a fresh loaf of bread rested beneath a folded linen cloth. It hadn't been there the night before, and as the villagers gathered, some weeping, some smiling through tears, they broke the bread and passed it among themselves. No one spoke of miracles. No one needed to. The flame at the door, though small, burned on. They left it there for days, then weeks. Someone came each evening to trim the wick, pour in oil, light the flame. No one was assigned. They just knew, because Salma's home had become more than a house. It was a threshold, a place between earth and heaven, where love had kept watch until love himself came to walk her home. Bedtime takeaway. When you live your life with the lamp lit, your leaving becomes a light for others to follow. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. Years passed. The olive tree by Salma's door grew taller. Its branches stretched like arms remembering how to bless. The stone path to the house grew smooth with the tread of many feet. Not tourists, not pilgrims, just ordinary souls drawn to something quiet and true. The lamp never went out. Some nights it burned low. Some nights it danced brighter than seemed possible. But it was always lit. Children were told the story of the woman who waited by her door, of the bread that appeared the day she passed, of the guest no one could see, but everyone seemed to feel when they sat in her chair. The house never became a shrine. It remained a home. Dust settled gently on the shelves. Old chairs creaked kindly, and the breeze still moved through the open window like a whispered song. One day, a young woman arrived from a distant town. She had heard only fragments of the story, but enough to hope it was real. She sat near the lamp, in silence, not asking, just breathing. And that night, when all had gone quiet, she wrote a letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in a small wooden box she found tucked behind the jar. She whispered, "I don't know if you still read these, but if you do, I'm listening." In the early dawn, she awoke to find a single olive leaf placed atop her letter. No footsteps in the dust, no signs of intrusion, just a leaf and peace. Take a deep breath. Let the peace come gently. She lit the lamp that evening, then sat beside it, and for a long time, she simply rested, not to wait for something, not to earn anything, but to be near, like Salma once did, like Miriam before her, like every soul who ever wondered if love would truly come, and stayed long enough to realize it already had. Bedtime takeaway. The light you keep today may guide someone you'll never meet. Right to the feet of Jesus, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew 5:16. The young woman's name was Layla. She never planned to stay long. She came to rest, to breathe, to mend the ache inside her that even prayer hadn't seemed to reach. But the house didn't ask anything of her. It only received. There was no pressure to be spiritual, no voices urging her to serve or speak. only the quiet invitation to sit and to watch and to listen. She found herself waking early, before the first bird cried into the gray, and each evening she would place her hand on the oil jar, still miraculously half full, and pour it gently into the lamp. She didn't always pray. Sometimes she just stood there in silence, letting the light speak for her. One night, a child wandered in. He didn't knock, didn't ask. He just came in, holding a piece of torn bread in his hand. "My mother told me this is the house where Jesus visits," he said. Layla smiled. "He visits many places." "But she said this is where the light teaches you how to wait." Layla knelt beside him. The lamp glowed between them. "Then stay a while," she whispered. "Take a deep breath. Let your soul remember the wisdom of slow waiting." The boy sat, watching the flame dance. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. That night, Layla finally understood. The lamp wasn't just about light. It was about faithfulness, about letting hope speak when words fall short, about preparing a place whether or not you knew when he'd come. It wasn't magic. It wasn't spectacle. It was simple obedience, bathed in love. The kind of obedience that quietly teaches generation after generation what it means to keep watch, to keep loving, to keep lighting, to keep longing, and to trust not in what you feel, but in who you wait for. Bedtime takeaway: your small, steady faith is shaping hearts you may never see. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. Matthew 25:13. That night, the door stayed open. Not by accident, not from wind, but because Layla had felt it the quiet tug to leave it unlatched. The lamp beside it flickered faithfully, casting its soft glow into the darkness beyond the threshold. The stars blinked above like scattered prayers. The olive branches swayed slowly, as though bowing to something unseen. She sat in Salma's chair, not thinking, not planning, just being. And then she felt it, a breath in the room, a presence, as familiar as love, as tender as rain falling on dry soil. She didn't turn quickly. She had learned by now that some arrivals do not need eyes to be seen. But when she did glance toward the doorway, someone was standing there. He didn't step in. He simply stood in the soft border between earth and heaven. He looked at the lamp, then at her, and smiled. Layla didn't cry. Her eyes remained wide, clear. She didn't speak. She only bowed her head. The man stepped forward slowly, as though he did not want to startle the stillness. And then he said the same words he had once whispered to another woman in this same room. "You kept it lit." She nodded. "For her," she said. "For you." He looked at the chair across from her. "I sat here once. I know. And you have kept watch." Layla breathed deeply. Her whole chest softened. "It didn't always feel like watching," she said. "Sometimes it felt like forgetting. Sometimes like failing. But I stayed." He walked to the table and ran his fingers along the wood. Then, gently, he placed something in the center. It was a small olive branch, fresh, alive, still glistening with dew though the night had been dry. "For the next one who waits," he said, "take a deep breath. Let the promise of his visit quiet your fears." And then he stepped back, not vanishing, not leaving, just slipping into the darkness like the final line of a lullaby. The lamp burned on. The door remained open, and Layla sat a little taller, not because she had become more, but because she had remembered whose light she bore. Bedtime takeaway. Even when the world forgets to watch, Jesus still comes to the hearts that keep the door open. And the things you have heard me say, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. 2 Timothy 2:2. The olive branch stayed on the table for days. Some visitors noticed it, others didn't. But to Layla, it became a reminder this wasn't her light alone. It never had been. It had always been borrowed, a flame passed from one quiet soul to another, from Miriam to Salma to her. And now it was time to pass it again. She didn't make an announcement. She didn't seek a replacement. She simply watched, listened, and one day, just before sunset, a girl arrived, barely 20, eyes weary beyond her years, carrying a small woven bag and a silence that spoke of recent pain. Layla welcomed her in, said nothing about the house, the lamp, the stories. She simply offered water and silence. That night, they lit the lamp together. The young girl's hands shook slightly. Layla placed hers over them. "You don't need to be strong," she whispered. "Just willing." The wick caught fire, and a warm glow spread across both of their faces. It was enough. Take a deep breath. Let yourself be part of the lineage of light. The girl, whose name was Aya, didn't ask many questions. She didn't speak of her grief, but she stayed. She watched Layla prepare the small meals. She learned when to open the shutters, when to water the herbs, when to refill the oil. Most importantly, she learned how to sit still, to listen, to let the lamp speak when words failed. One evening, after many weeks, Layla pressed the olive branch into Aya's hands. "I think he left this for you," she said softly. Aya looked down, held it to her chest, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself cry. Not the loud kind, not the broken kind, just quiet tears from someone who finally felt safe again. Bedtime takeaway. The light you tend today may be the first warmth someone else has felt in a long, long time. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest. Galatians 6:9. Aya stayed, Layla aged, and the house became a place where seasons passed without drama, only faithfulness. They spoke less now, but understood more. Aya no longer trembled when trimming the wick. Her hands were sure, not from strength, but from reverence. She had come to see what Salma once knew, what Layla had learned over time, that God does not rush through the places where people wait with love. The lamp still stood at the door. Each evening, they lit it together, not because they feared the dark, but because they honored the light. Sometimes, visitors would come, not many. A young mother who had lost her voice after grief, an old soldier with eyes too tired to look forward, a boy whose parents whispered that he heard things no one else did. They all came, they all sat, and no one was hurried. The house offered no solutions, only stillness, only the warm invitation to stay until you could breathe again, and always the lamp burned on. Take a deep breath. Let this be your quiet place tonight. One afternoon, as Layla sat under the olive tree, Aya knelt beside her. "I don't know if I can keep this going," she said. Layla smiled faintly. You're not meant to keep it going, just to keep it open. Aya frowned slightly. The house, she asked. No, Layla whispered. Your heart. The lamp, even then, was glowing inside, as if it already knew that one day soon, Layla would leave her chair and take her seat at a table not built by hands, but the light would stay, because someone had learned to love it well. Bedtime takeaway. You don't have to hold the light forever. You only need to love it well until the next heart is ready. Now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. 1 Corinthians 13:12. The house was quiet. Not unusual, but somehow deeper than usual. Like the air had paused. Like the walls were waiting. Layla lay in her bed near the open window. The olive branches outside stirred gently, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. Aya sat nearby, not praying, not speaking, just sitting. The lamp was lit. Its glow stretched across the threshold, as it had for so many years, welcoming the night not as a thief, but as a friend. Layla opened her eyes. They were dim now, but clear. Aya. The girl leaned close. You've tended it well, Layla whispered, then smiled. Aya's eyes filled. I just copied what I saw. Layla reached for her hand. I was copying too. Take a deep breath. Feel the grace of being part of something long and quiet. The room was still, but the stillness felt full, as if something beautiful were about to arrive. Layla exhaled one last time, not with struggle, not with fear, but with peace, like someone finally setting down a basket that had been carried faithfully for many miles. Aya stayed beside her until the breath was gone, but the presence remained. The lamp still flickered. The olive branch rested on the table, and the air, the very air, seemed to sing. The next morning, neighbors gathered quietly. There were no loud laments, only reverent silence. Aya greeted them not with sorrow, but with warmth. She saw him. She whispered, I know she did. That night, Aya lit the lamp, alone, for the first time, and it burned, as if carried forward by every soul who had ever waited in that little house. Bedtime takeaway. When saints slip quietly into glory, they leave behind more than memories. They leave light. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. Hebrews 13:2. The seasons turned, the olive tree bloomed, then bent with fruit, then stood bare again as it had for generations. Time softened the edges of Aya's grief, not by erasing it, but by folding it into something holy. She still lit the lamp every evening, still swept the stones by the door, still left the window slightly ajar, as if the wind carried messages too sacred to close out. One quiet evening, as the sun slipped low over the hills, a knock came. Not loud, not hurried, just gentle. Aya opened the door and found a traveler dust on his robe, a kindness in his eyes that startled her. He asked for water. She brought it, cool, clear, from the old clay jar in the corner. He drank slowly, then said, This house has a stillness I haven't found anywhere else. Aya smiled. You're not the first to say that. He looked at the lamp, then at her. Do you know who started it? Aya paused. "Yes," she said softly. Her name was Salma. She waited at the door, and he came. The man tilted his head. "Do you believe he's still here?" Aya didn't hesitate. "I don't just believe it. I've lived it." Take a deep breath. Let this question settle into your spirit. What if he's already sitting beside you? The man stood slowly. He stepped toward the lamp, ran his fingers just above the flame, not touching it, but near enough that Aya noticed something odd. The flame didn't flicker. It glowed steady. As if recognizing him, he turned back to her. "Thank you for keeping it lit." And in that moment, she knew. The same way Layla had known. The same way Salma had known. Not through thunder, not through words carved in stone, but through the deep, unmistakable warmth of being seen by the one you've waited for. She fell to her knees, not in fear, but in reverence, and he touched her shoulder gently. "No need to kneel," he said. "I've been here all along." Bedtime takeaway. Sometimes the guest you've been waiting for has already taken a seat at your table. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. Revelation 21:23. The man did not stay long. He stepped outside just as the stars appeared. The lamp cast a soft golden glow behind him. Aya stood in the doorway, watching him disappear down the road. But the feeling did not leave. It settled in her chest, in her breath, in the stillness of the room long after he was gone. Or rather not gone, just unseen again. She turned back toward the table where the olive branch still lay, and beside it, a folded piece of parchment. She hadn't seen him place it. She hadn't heard a sound. But there it was. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The writing was simple, familiar. It read, "You kept your promise, so I kept mine. This house will always have a light, and so will you." Aya pressed the letter to her heart. She did not weep, only sat down and let the quiet become worship. Take a deep breath. Let the promise find its place in you. 2. In time, she passed the house on, to another, then another, but the lamp was never extinguished. It burned through droughts and floods, wars and peace, joy and aching silence. Not because of magic, not because of law, but because hearts, simple, faithful hearts, kept choosing to wait, to hope, to prepare a place for the one who comes without sound, but never without love. And so it is told that even now there is a small house at the edge of a village with an olive tree beside it and a lamp in the doorway that never runs out of oil. The light never boasts, never shouts, but it burns, steady, true, for him, and for every tired traveler still trying to find their way home. Final bedtime takeaway. You are not forgotten. Your light matters, and when your waiting is done, he will come to sit beside you, to break bread with you, to carry you home by the glow of the lamp you kept burning. Now the stories are finished, but the light remains. Perhaps you see yourself in Miriam, placing small offerings of faith, even when no one notices. Perhaps you are like Salma, lighting a lamp in the dark, not because you are certain, but because you hope. Wherever you are, however you feel tonight, I want you to remember this. You don't have to be strong. You only need to stay open. God does not ask for noise, only nearness. So rest now. Let your breath slow. Let the light of these stories settle in your soul like soft oil poured into a tired lamp. And when you wake tomorrow, may you know deeply, quietly, that He has always been there, watching, loving, waiting just outside your door.